Then the legal expert said, "The one who demonstrated mercy toward him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." I am certain that I've used this passage before, this story before. It's the story of the Good Samaritan, as we often call it. The story, as you remember, goes something like this. There's a man going from Jerusalem to Jericho. And as he's on his way, he finds himself being robbed by robbers and left on the side of the road for dead. Along comes a priest and does nothing for him. Along comes another holy person and does nothing for him. And finally along comes a Samaritan and sees this Jewish man lying in the street. Samaritans and Jews notoriously didn't get along, and there's a long history to that, another devotion another day. But the Samaritan stops and gives aid and takes him to a hotel, an inn, or just a home, whatever you want to call it, and pays the homeowner, the innkeeper, and says, "I'll come back, and if there's anything owed more, I'll take care of this. Please take care of this man." And so we call it the parable of the Good Samaritan. But this parable ends with Jesus then asking the legal expert, who's having this conversation about who's the neighbor. And so Jesus says to him, he says, "Who is the neighbor?" And he says, "The one who showed kindness, the one who showed compassion." And Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." Now, what I've always found interesting about this passage is it actually kind of sounds a little bit like a trick question. And here's what I mean. Jesus says, "Who is the neighbor?" Right? Now, our first inclination would also be the one who showed compassion, right? And Jesus is happy with that answer, and he says, "Yeah, go and do the same thing. Be that neighbor. Be compassionate. Be loving. Help those whom you're told not to help." But you see, there's another answer too. The answer to the question, or the answers to the question of who is the neighbor, really should be every single person in that story. Not just the Samaritan, not just the one who showed compassion, but also those who came up and did nothing. They were neighbors too. You see, neighbors aren't just those who we love, who we agree with, who are in our camp. God reminds us that everyone is to be our neighbor. Everyone is to be our brother, our sister, our sibling. We're to love those who love us, but also love our enemies. It's almost like Jesus was asking this question to see what he picked up on in the story. Who did he identify with? It's good that he saw value in seeing the Samaritan as the neighbor, even though he couldn't bring himself to actually say the Samaritan. Did you notice that? But everybody in that story is neighbor. We're supposed to be, at least. You see, sometimes we're not the best neighbors, are we? Sometimes we fall short of what it means to be a good neighbor. But that doesn't mean that we're not neighbors any longer. And those across the way from us that fail to be good neighbors, it doesn't disqualify them from being neighbors. They remain neighbors. We're just invited to be good neighbors. And so the man answered correctly, albeit he couldn't say the name. But the good neighbor in the story was the one who showed compassion. And so go and do likewise. Amen.